The Divider, Trump in the White House, 2017-2021, by Peter Baker and Susan Glasser. From the very first moment, Donald John Trump descended into the renowned Oval Office as the newly appointed 45th President of the United States, a palpable sense of transformation filled the air. It wasn't the weight of history or the enormity of the responsibility he'd just assumed that captured his attention. Instead, his eyes were drawn to the mundane, the room's lighting. How do they get the lighting to do that? He marveled, showcasing a fascination more aligned with a seasoned stage performer than a global leader. This seemingly trivial observation was a harbinger of a presidency that would be as much about image, perception, and spectacle as it would be about policy, governance, and diplomacy. Trump's world was one of carefully curated appearances, where reality was often bent to fit a desired narrative, a trait he had honed during his decades in the cutthroat business world of New York City real estate and reality television, and he was bringing his reality show to Washington. Every morning, Trump would engage in a meticulous ritual of hairstyling, a complex three-step process to mold his long strands into place, cemented with his favorite hairspray. His attire was equally calculated, always a dark suit with a tie knotted tightly, believed to have a slimming effect. He was acutely aware of the camera's gaze, dictating angles and lighting to ensure he always looked his best. These were not mere quirks of a vain septuagenarian. They were the meticulously crafted affectations of a man who believed himself to be an aspiring strongman, a leader for troubled times. His obsession with image was not just personal vanity. It was a tool, a means to construct the reality of his presidency. The grandeur of the White House, with its rich history and symbolic weight, was reduced to a stage set meticulously designed to project the image of a powerful leader. In Trump's mind, he was the hero America had been waiting for, a strong man for troubled times, a belief that left many, including those working for him, in a state of perpetual uncertainty. Was he merely a quirky, vain septuagenarian, or was there a more menacing undertone to his affectations? The world watched as Trump, with supreme self-confidence, embarked on a presidency marked by a stark departure from the norms and traditions of his predecessors. His worldview was not rooted in a coherent ideology, but rather in a conviction that America had been taken advantage of, a nation led by what he perceived as weak and incompetent leaders. This belief, coupled with his admiration for strongmen like Vladimir Putin, set the stage for a presidency that would be defined by its unpredictability and its unprecedented nature. As he settled into his role, Trump's lack of knowledge about the intricacies of government and global affairs became increasingly apparent. He was, as one top aide put it, ignorant about most things, a fact that he seemed neither to know nor to care about. He famously eschewed lengthy briefing papers, preferring to get his information from television, a habit that often led to decisions based on incomplete or inaccurate information. His management style was reminiscent of his days running the Trump Organization, where he was the sole decision-maker, unaccountable to any board. He thrived on the chaos and infighting among his staff, viewing it as a competition for his favor, a dynamic that created a toxic work environment characterized by perpetual insecurity and a constant battle for the president's approval. This chaotic approach to governance was not accidental. It was a deliberate strategy, one that Trump had honed over decades in business and on his reality television show, The Apprentice. He viewed life as a zero-sum game, where winning was everything and the rules were for suckers. This philosophy, instilled in him by his father, Fred Trump, who had taught him to be a killer, shaped his approach to the presidency. He was not interested in collaboration or consensus building. He was there to win, to dominate, to impose his will on a world he saw as inherently hostile and competitive. The inauguration of Donald Trump was a spectacle unlike any other, marking the beginning of an era defined by division and discord. His inaugural address, far from being a unifying call to action, was a fiery denunciation of the establishment, a declaration of war against the very institutions he was now sworn to protect. The speech, crafted by Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller, was a stark departure from the traditional messages of hope and unity that had characterized previous inaugurations. Instead, it painted a picture of an America in decline, ravaged by economic dislocation, foreign exploitation, and political corruption. This was not a celebration of American democracy, but a battle cry, a call to arms against perceived enemies, both foreign and domestic. The early days of the Trump administration were marked by a series of chaotic and controversial decisions, driven by a president who seemed more interested in the optics of action than in the substance of policy. Executive orders were hastily drafted, often without proper legal review or consultation with relevant agencies. The infamous travel ban, aimed at several predominantly Muslim countries, was a prime example of this impulsiveness. Signed with little regard for its legal or practical implications, leaving officials scrambling to implement a policy that was as poorly conceived as it was divisive. It was a pattern that would repeat itself throughout Trump's presidency, a cycle of impulsive decisions followed by frantic efforts to manage the fallout. The internal dynamics of the Trump White House were equally tumultuous. Factions formed and reformed with dizzying speed, each vying for power and influence. There was the Republican National Committee contingent, led by Reince Priebus, the Breitbart news crew, championed by Steve Bannon, and the family faction, represented by Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. These groups, along with a cast of other characters, engaged in a constant, cutthroat battle for supremacy. A battle that Trump not only tolerated, but actively encouraged. He pitted his advisors against each other, creating a climate of fear and mistrust that left him as the ultimate arbiter, the sole decider in a White House defined by its dysfunction. The president's relationships with his staff were transactional, based on a twisted interpretation of loyalty that demanded complete fealty to him, but offered little in return. He was quick to turn on those he perceived as disloyal, often firing them via tweet or through the media, a public shaming that served as a warning to others. Even his family was not immune to his whims. The rivalry between Melania Trump and Ivanka Trump, for instance, was a constant undercurrent. A subtle yet persistent competition for the role of leading lady in the White House. The tension between them, often expressed through seemingly trivial disputes over protocol and access, reflected the broader dysfunction within the administration, a dysfunction that extended to the president's own family. As the months passed, it became clear that Trump was not just challenging the norms of the presidency, he was actively seeking to dismantle them. He attacked the media, the judiciary, the intelligence community, and any other institution that dared to question him. He used his Twitter account as a weapon, firing off insults and accusations at all hours of the day and night. He lied with a frequency and audacity that shocked even his most seasoned advisors, and he did it all with a sense of impunity, secure in the knowledge that his base would support him no matter what. The Trump presidency, in short, was a stress test for American democracy, a 4-year experiment in just how far a president could push the boundaries of acceptable behavior before facing real consequences. And as the nation grappled with the fallout from his tumultuous term in office, one thing became increasingly clear. Donald Trump had changed the rules of the game, and the country would never be the same. In the midst of this political maelstrom, Trump's interactions with foreign leaders added another layer of complexity and concern. His disdain for traditional allies and his admiration for authoritarian figures like Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un were not just rhetorical flourishes, they were indicative of a worldview that prioritized personal relationships over established alliances. Trump's attempts to cultivate these relationships often led to awkward and sometimes alarming situations, as evidenced by his interactions with leaders like Angela Merkel and Justin Trudeau. These encounters, often characterized by a mix of flattery, bullying, and unpredictability, left foreign leaders perplexed and concerned about the future of American foreign policy. One of the most striking examples of Trump's unconventional approach to diplomacy was his decision to hold a summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Singapore. This unprecedented meeting, which Trump hailed as a historic breakthrough, was in reality a carefully orchestrated piece of political theater. Trump's eagerness to meet with Kim, despite the latter's abysmal human rights record and ongoing nuclear weapons program, was driven more by a desire for a public relations victory than by any realistic hope of achieving denuclearization. The summit, while producing plenty of photo ops, yielded little in the way of tangible results, a fact that Trump seemed either unwilling or unable to grasp. Similarly, Trump's handling of the relationship with Russia raised eyebrows and concerns both at home and abroad. His repeated praise for Putin, his refusal to condemn Russian interference in the 2016 election, and his willingness to take the Russian leader's word over that of his own intelligence agencies all contributed to a growing sense of unease about the president's true allegiances. The Mueller investigation, which loomed over much of Trump's presidency, further fueled these concerns, although it ultimately did not establish a criminal conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. As the 2020 election approached, Trump's behavior became even more erratic and unpredictable. He continued to stoke racial tensions, attack his political opponents, and undermine faith in the democratic process. His refusal to commit to a peaceful transfer of power, a cornerstone of American democracy, was particularly alarming. And his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, which he repeatedly downplayed and dismissed as a hoax, only added to the sense of chaos and crisis that had come to define his presidency. In the end, Trump's defeat in the 2020 election was a repudiation not just of his policies, but of his entire approach to politics. He had sought to govern through division and discord, and the American people, by a decisive margin, had rejected his vision. But Trump's refusal to accept defeat, his baseless claims of voter fraud, and his unprecedented efforts to overturn the election results posed a threat to American democracy, unlike anything seen in modern times. The events of January 6, 2021, when a mob of Trump supporters stormed the Capitol in an attempt to stop the certification of Joe Biden's victory, were the culmination of Trump's 4-year assault on democratic norms and institutions. It was a day that would live in infamy, a stark reminder of the fragility of American democracy and the dangers of a politics based on lies, division, and the unbridled pursuit of power. As the dust settled and the nation began to grapple with the aftermath of Trump's presidency, one thing was clear: the country had been profoundly changed. The norms and traditions that had long guided American politics had been shattered, perhaps irreparably. The divisions that Trump had exploited and exacerbated had grown deeper and more entrenched. And the question of how to move forward, how to heal the wounds of the past 4 years, remained unanswered. In the end, the Trump presidency was a cautionary tale, a stark warning about the dangers of demagoguery, the fragility of democratic institutions, and the corrosive effects of a politics based on division and discord. It was a presidency that tested the limits of American democracy and left the nation grappling with a legacy of division and distrust that would take years, if not decades, to overcome. And as the country looked to the future, one question loomed large: would America learn from the mistakes of the past, or would it be doomed to repeat them? The story of Donald Trump's presidency is not just a story about one man or even one administration. It is a story about America, about the forces that shaped it, the divisions that define it, and the challenges that lie ahead. It is a story that is still being written, one that will continue to unfold long after Trump has left the stage. And it is a story that will determine the future of American democracy for generations to come. If you enjoyed this book breakdown, please consider liking this video and subscribing to get notified when we post our next book.